Well, thanks for the invite, and a pleasure to be part of this. So for the people that are here, maybe I introduce myself. So I'm an architect. I'm also an educator, part-time educator at the Bartlett and GA. As I work as an architect at Foster & Partners, where I'm an associate partner, part of the architecture studios. I used to be for 3 years in one of the research teams, focusing mostly on geometry computation. But as a, I guess, side research and interest for me, I started looking into usage of technologies that were emergent in the design process. And at the time when I was looking at this, virtual reality and augmented reality were just starting. So things like the Oculus, which was not yet Facebook, it was a startup. Was quite exciting. We had the first prototype in the office, which was very clunky, but still amazing. And similar with the HoloLens. And I guess I was lucky enough to be part of the prototypes, the initial seed series of devices. I remember getting one in London. It was almost like a insane process of getting all the paperwork and everything to work. But anyway, I was interested in that as mostly as something in the tools we use for architecture, and initially was mostly for communicating design. And I guess maybe I share my screen and I'll show you what my initial goal was at this. And again, you have to take it with a bit of a, it was prototypical. So at the time, I was part of this competition project. It was somewhere in China, in Hainan, was this artificial island which we're asked to design. And it was a competition. Lots of famous people, Morphosis, UN Studio, us, and many more were invited to be part of. So we submitted our design, quite a nice design, but more interesting than the design. We managed to do for the client a small prototype of a presentation. So when it started, the concept was to present the island and explain somehow the systems that would be required to make this island work. So there were various layers, and this is what most times people that are not experts in construction struggle with. How do you understand the required systems for, this is more or less a neighborhood. In my country, for example, this will be considered a small town, and explain what makes it work. And it's all the parts, the water systems, communication systems, sewage systems, but also the architecture itself. So we wanted to create something that you can interact with and explain quite easily. So you see here in the office, two of our partners playing with what a third person, in this case me, we were looking at the layers. So that was the concept, right? And we built it. So first prototype, clunky, physical model underneath, starting to show the layers. And the interesting part when you interact with it is very natural. It's based on language. So you don't have gesture or anything. You just talk and you say, hey, show me whatever system, and then you can explain it. Okay. So that was the first prototype. And we actually built a very beautiful model. So what you see here as a white base is just a mock-up, but we had the proper physical model. And now it's with a bit of sound. Show mobility. Show nature. Show farming. Show information. Okay, so you see how it works with language, and I don't have the final part, but essentially even the visuals in different parts of the island, how they were distributed, these unique spaces. So what we did, we went and presented to the client, and show them this interactive model, which I think they were a bit blown away by it. So what was interesting, we actually lost the competition because there was an international jury, and the competition was awarded to dealers Cofidio. And the client said at the end, no, we want to work with Foster & Partners. We find a lot more easy to understand what they want to do, and twist of events, we got the project. So it kind of shows you the power of this, right? Like how do you go and you communicate this, right? And now it's an initial thing, right? Like since then the mixed reality has evolved quite a bit, and the tools are a lot more advanced. So I can only imagine what you could do next. So I was talking a bit with Abel earlier that this world of where you might design the digital space of a building could be a thing we will do in the future as architects. Now about the tools. So the main tool I used during that time and still use was Unity. I found it as too easy to learn and easy to develop with. Now, it's not the only game engine. It's probably the one that most people start with. And then I guess the more advanced they get, they go into Unreal Engine or CryEngine. But that's the tool I'm going to use today. And again, when I was doing this, they were not at all looking at architecture. For Unity technologies, architecture was not even something they thought about. Now they are actually thinking about it, but in a very different way that I would think about it. They still see it as a means to maybe present the work in a very traditional way. But anyway, the direction for me is clear. More and more the industry is using this, and more we as architects could leverage it. Now, I guess you joining might want to know where you learn things. So I still think for getting started and going into the world of game engines, probably Unity would be my recommendation for anyone starting. They have a great learning portal with sorts of pathways to learn, and I find it quite amazing because you can pick it up maybe a couple of months in, you can produce things quite well. So okay, so what will we do today? So my let's say we have about maybe 2 hours and a half. Let's aim to finish around 3. My goal is to take you through a few tasks that will help you get from what you would normally do as an architect, like modeling and texturing, to the Unity environment. So, and in there, understand a bit how it works, and also ultimately what you're gonna develop for, because it's one of the major decisions. Is it virtual reality or is it augmented reality? The hardware is quite different. And then we're gonna create a small scene. We'll bring our geometry, play a bit with lighting, a bit of environment creation, and then we'll talk a bit about possible user interfaces. So I have a few things that I guess I did a link for this. So I guess I'll drop it in the chat. So these are a few things you can download so you can work side by side with me. And the first thing we're gonna look at is this house. Now, this house has an interesting history. I guess a long time ago, when before game engines and everything, the main tool to visualize architecture was this, I guess, rendering tool called V-Ray. And I was a student at the time, and got quite good at it and decided maybe not a bad way of making something extra. So I started to make these models that I share with people, and this was one of it. Like, it's a made-up design and visualizing it. And now, just as a fun thing, at the time, rendering this image took somewhere in the range of 4 to 6 hours. So you can imagine how much we've evolved. We can have the same thing in real time. But anyway, that's the house we're gonna look at. And I shared with you a rhino model. So I guess this would be something you would do on your day-to-day basis. It's nothing special. It's very simple 3D modeling, but with a bit of details, right? Like trying to add as much as possible details, but it's a very basic model. Now, I assume you would know how to do this in any platform, be it would be something like Rhino, or maybe it's something like SketchUp, or maybe it's something like Revit. I don't know what other people use these days, but I assume you would be modeling some design or geometry. Now, the key thing is to sort of plan a bit what you want to do as an experience. So the first thing which makes sense for me is to maybe split it into parts, right? Like, for example, maybe I would show an exploded version of this, right? Like maybe I want something where I can take things apart so I can show inside or something like this. So that might be a first strategy, how to do things. And then if I look at it, this model right now, it's just simple geometry. It has no textures, right? It's like a basic, simple, unlit geometry. So the important thing is that once you go from your modeling to something like a game engine, most of the assets, you should have them made. So you might want to start to think of what are the materials you're going to use, right? So for this, you can use, for example, we are here in Rhino. We have materials. I'm gonna pull this to the side. You can see it a bit bigger. Okay, so I guess all the modeling environments will have at least a basic material creation toolset, right? So Rhino has already some built-in materials like glass or metal, but generally you want to customize them, right? Like you want to make your own custom materials. So I don't know, maybe we try to do a material for one of the walls. And simple choices, like what would be the color for that particular material. And then properties, like is it a glossy material, has reflectivity, why not? And straightforward, you can assign that to an object. Now, that's not a very exciting material. Generally, to make them more realistic, you want to get textures. Now, I'll show you two ways that I do this. So one simple way, maybe let's look for, I don't know, a wood texture. Now, it's very important the keywords you put. So we know that textures get repeated. So it's important whenever you look at textures to get textures that can be easily copied. And when you copy one next to each other, you don't see that it was copied. So for example, if I look for a seamless texture, I might have the chance to find a texture that you can copy many times and it still looks good. Now, another thing that this is particular to game engines. So game engines work with square textures. So even though something like odd aspect ratio texture might work in Rhino or 3D Max, for game engines, you generally want to use square ratio textures. So that's something you should look for. Now, I can see this is a texture that gets repeated, right? So the edge here continues here. And it's also a square texture. So this is more or less a good texture to use. So maybe I'll save this as a texture just to show you what you can do with it. Okay, so I'm not gonna use a color because I think it's not so interesting, but I can assign a texture instead, right? Okay, so now the first problem I see, and I'm gonna isolate this object. My texture seems to be applied in a very awkward way. I'm also going to reset my environment so I don't get all these reflections. And I still get them because my object is very reflective. Okay, so I see already has like a very odd way the texture is applied. And for that, you can use a process called UV mapping. And all modeling tools or all modeling environments will have a version of this. I think the ones in Rhino evolved quite a lot, but initially I was not doing texturing in Rhino. I would go to something like 3D Max, which I'll show you for something a bit more advanced later. So this process of texture mapping is a way of controlling how a texture is applied to an object. Right now, I look at this, it seems to be applied randomly on each face. So it's not something I would like to have. So we have in here a few texture mapping tools. I think the one that I use quite a bit is this box mapping, which I'm actually gonna make. So you essentially create a box, and each face of the box represents the size of the texture. And you can imagine that this texture or box gets copied over and over. So if I apply this, you see what happened. My texture, if I go and say to show my mapping, I see this box, right? So you can imagine this texture essentially gets copied and over again. So two of them is two textures side by side, right? And again, when you have this box mapping, you can control the placement of the texture, but you can also control the scale of it. So for example, if I grab one of the scale handles and press shift, I can increase or decrease my texture uniformly. So it's quite a decent process by which you can go and create your textures, okay? Now, I would say you would want to assign materials to everything and do textures for everything. But the truth is, for game engines, having just the texture is not enough because they have processes by which lighting is calculated. So for that, there are special maps that dictate how light might reflect or how the displacement of the material. Now, this type of materials, there are many places to get them, but the one I like a lot, which is what I used quite a bit, was substances. So they're special in the sense that you get not only the diffuse map, but you also get reflection and other maps. Now, you need accounts for this to be able to get them. But again, another one that I like, and it actually has quite a lot of, well, you can look for Unreal materials. Where is it? Well, it's the marketplace, but they set up a it's not substance, it has a different name. I can't remember the name of it, but you can get materials with extra textures. Okay, now I promised I was also gonna show something a bit more advanced for the way we could texture something that maybe you want to control. So for example, let's say I have this type of face, right? And I look at it, it has a texture that is a bit more controlled. It's not just something repeated. It has edges that are darkened and so on. So for that, what you could do is to do a custom UV mapping. Now, I guess the best way to do it would be to use a planar map, which let's do something like that. So I'll go in here, I'll apply a planar map, and I'll do it from one of the views, right view. So I'll do a planar map that more or less matches my object. Now, if I go into something like Photoshop, I would actually need my object. So a quick way of doing it is to snip, just so you can get the size of the texture you need. So we'll go to Photoshop and we'll make a new file. Well, actually, let's save the snip first. Okay, so then what I'll do, I'll just open my my file, the snip I just made. So I need to create a texture that is more or less this size. Now the snip is probably very low resolution. So what I need to do is to make this a bit bigger. So a good idea is to change to pixels. So if I do this something like 1,000 pixels, that is quite a decent size for a texture, right? Okay, so I know this is more or less the size I need. I'm gonna look for something like a curtain and okay, so maybe something like this. That looks pretty nice. Actually, maybe I'll show you another website that I use a lot called Unsplash. Unsplash. So this has a very large database of free images. You have to make an account. But the nice thing, seems I forgot my password. Anyway, I can't remember my password, but it has a very large database of textures and images that are high resolution. So you can get quite nice images. Anyway, I'm gonna use this curtain I found online. It doesn't matter for the purpose of what we're doing. It will do the job. Okay, So now I can go and sort of customize this. So maybe I do something like panels, and why not? I can stretch a bit this, probably will still look pretty good. And I can sort of map this shadow gap. So maybe I make with a small brush. And make my shadow gap. So there we go. And you can also look for things like streaks, or maybe things like this that or rust. That might look also quite nice. And again, I might want to go and place that. So it's sort of like rusting at the wherever there's a seam, you might go and rust. Okay, so I've created a custom texture that will match my mapping. So I can save this. I guess I could save it in here. So I would need to make a new material. Let's call this, I guess, curtain wall. And I'll go and get my curtain wall texture, which I'm going to assign to this object. So now, if I go and see this one in render mode, there we go. It shows with those custom textures. Now, it is working quite well because it's just a face and it gets projected. But you see on the sides, it gets stretched. So unfortunately, this has to be solved a bit differently. And again, you can do a different process of mapping this. But for now, this is doing quite a good job, right? And I could make the same thing for this face that has 4 joints and slowly build my materials. The truth is I already made that. So you will actually have all this. So I'm gonna show you this extra process where we get an object, and then that object, we will map these custom textures to each face, okay? That unfortunately is not something you can do so easily in Rhino, but it's not so difficult in other apps. So I'm gonna show you a bit of 3D Max, like very, very simple things, but it will be good to have in your toolset as well knowledge of this. So I'm gonna export this geometry, and also once I export this geometry, I wanna prepare it also for the game engine. So to prepare it for the game engine, I'm gonna go into the shaded mode because I don't need to see the textures, but it's a good idea to mesh things because the game engines don't operate with these closed poly surfaces. They actually need mesh geometry. So now if I preview this, you see it has a lot of faces. I don't know, maybe it's not so obvious. Let me change the color of this object to something different. Okay, so now you can see it a bit more obvious. So it has a lot of faces. Now you can control that by saying, hey, give me less polygons. That's already a bit better, right? It has, the faces are somehow reduced. Still quite a lot, if you ask me. Now, if you want, you can get into control way. And you can say, hey, I will allow jagged seams. So that already, at least these faces that are very coplanar are simplified. You see, you get one big face. Now, it does a really poor job where the geometry gets a bit more complex, which is not ideal. But I guess for now, maybe we accept this. You can have also a play with the numbers, but I don't want to make it too complicated. So for now, just do level of subdivision minimum and say you want, you accept jagged seams. Okay, so now I have my object as a mesh. It looks very similar to what I had before, but it's a mesh. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna export this. And I'm gonna do a format that is both used by 3D Max, but also by Unity itself. So I'm gonna go and make a new folder. So the format I'm looking for is either OBJ or FBX. Both of them work. So we have OBJ or FBX. Now, I think FBX is a bit superior because it will retain information about materials and textures. OBJ depends on version because there are versions of OBJ that do not maintain texture information. I'm going to use FBX for now, and let's call this wall lower side or something like this. You can leave exactly as it is. A good idea is to map the Rhino Z to the FBX Y. And this is mostly because as architects, our coordinate system, it's usually X is, let's say, into the width, Y is into the depth, and Z is into the height. Now, this is not how game engines work. The axes are actually flipped. So Y is actually the reverse with Z. So when you export an object, you can actually map Rhino Z to FBXY, which would be something we could do if we would go directly to Unity. So if I would send this directly to Unity, that's what I would do. But because I'm going to 3D Max, I'm not gonna do this for now. Now, let's fire up 3D Max. And we'll do a bit of this custom texture applied to the object, and I'll show you how that works. It's not that hard. And again, it's quite a fun process. You can do a bit of custom mapping as well in Unity, so it's not that it doesn't have it. So you can actually do, which I think is this one. If I remember correctly. Yeah, but anyway. My 3D Max opens, which is open now. Oh. What's happening here? I have one of those things where, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go and import my geometry. Yeah, I can leave pretty much the settings as they are, but also, by the way, if you ever have where is it? You can in advanced, oh, not units. It's in inches. I should change my units first. Let me do that because I don't want to work in units. So if I go to customize unit setup, I'm gonna change to metric, and system I'm gonna change to meters because I don't want to work in inches. Sorry, I'm not much of inches metric system. My mind is not that advanced. Okay, now if I go in advanced, I should have had something with convert axis, but well, anyway, I'm gonna import the geometry. It brings also cameras that I don't need. These are the Rhino camera views. Okay, so I have now this object, and what I want to do, I want to somehow control the texture mapping, and for this we can apply a modifier. So anyway, 3D Max works with something called modifiers. You select an object, you go to the modifier tab, you have a list, and there is something called unwrap UVW. So this modifier, which is exactly what I want to do. It's kind of clever. It automatically picks up the faces. So if I open my UV editor, I have in here my faces, but they're sort of like all over the place. So what I'm gonna select them all and do mapping. I'm gonna do flat mapping. Angle, yeah, 45. Which essentially what it does, it packs the textures into one single space, okay? So now I have all my faces. Let me make this a bit smaller. So for example, if I select this face, it's representative of that face. And you see sort of like cleverly mapped all the textures into one texture. Okay, so that's great because I could use this now into maybe Photoshop. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna render the UVW template because I wanted more or less to create my texture. I can keep it 1024 by 1024. You can go even larger if you want, like maybe 2048 if you want to do more high resolution, but for what we're doing, 1024, it's okay. And you get this image that you can save as a PNG or as whatever you want. So you see the faces. So I'm gonna save this texture. And I'm gonna do a PNG format. Okay. And at this point, it's very similar to what we did with a custom planar map, with a planar map. So we'll get to this into Photoshop. Okay. I generally make a background for myself so I can easily see what I'm working with. So I'm gonna fill my background black. It's a bit easier to recognize things. And now I can actually go and maybe get my curtain texture, I guess, with the streaks maybe. So let's duplicate this, and I'm gonna send this to work texture, and maybe duplicate one of these. So the way it works now, I have this texture that I need to map to the walls themselves. So depending on the size, maybe this is too big. Let's do something like that. I can do a full wall. Okay, so that's the first wall. Perfect. I'm gonna duplicate this to have a copy of it. And now I can use my the actual rendered texture to create masks. So I could go in here, create this as a mask, and apply it, right? And probably I can do the streaks as well. I know the streaks are from the top. That's cool. Anyway, I can repeat this process. The next wall next to it is very similar. So I could just copy it across. Okay. What did I do? I got the wrong, yeah. Okay, but yeah, that looks good. There are a few more walls in here. And I guess these are sort of rotated. I'm not gonna do all of them because I don't have the patience to do all, but okay, let me get the 1, 2, and then go to, I guess it's this one, right? I'm gonna delete mask and apply the new one. Oh, sorry, apply the new one. And I'm gonna do the same for the streak. So it's contained. Perfect. So you're sort of designing the textures for this 3D geometry. And by the way, if you ever want to do fast rendering or things that don't require computation power, this is the way to do it. So instead of getting a tile, like we did with the wood and seamlessly repeating it, you would have one texture that gets applied to all the faces. Now, the trick is to make this texture large enough. If you make it too small, then you're gonna see pixels and everything. But this is probably the fastest way of rendering because you're asking the render engine to access only one texture instead of getting a texture, going through the process of copying it, wrapping it, whatever it has to do. Anyway, let's save this. So for now, I'm gonna save these. I don't have the patience to do all of them, but you have an example of one that's completely done. So I'm gonna save this as a JPEG. That's not bad. And let's save this as, no, I have to do save a copy. This is the new Photoshop. I hate they've done this. So when you do save as, it saves as a Photoshop. And if you want a JPEG, you need to save a copy. Okay, so wall texture edited. Okay, now I can go back to my app. I'm gonna close this. And I actually want to see that material, right? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna create a material. So I can actually use a standard general material. So I guess actually I'm gonna use, what a standard, where are they? I guess now everything is a physical material. Interesting. I guess everything is a physical material now, but we can work with this. Weight map, reflectivity. This is crazy. That I don't want such a complex material. Wow, even the surface material has gone nuts. Anyway, I'm gonna assign this material, and what I'm gonna do for the base color, I am going to do a general bitmap, and I can grab my texture that I just made. Yeah, assign this material. You know what? I'm gonna get this into Rhino because it annoys me. Well, at least you saw the process. So now I can go and get this into Rhino. Why not? I don't want to go through the new material system from 3D Max. Anyway, models, and let's call this UV map. Okay. Let's import that. Oh, sorry. Oh, it came also rotated. Let's flip the. Apparently I need to export it. Well, anyway, I can rotate it here. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make a custom material. So the texture I want to use is the one we just made. And you see the advantage, right? Like I control quite well what's happening with the texture. All right, so let's assume everything has been textured and mapped and everything, and then we need to export that to Unity. So now before we get into Unity, because I was telling you there are some big decisions to take when you make the project. Okay, so in Unity, you start with this thing called the Unity Hub, which is this thing. And in here, you're prompted to either make a project or make a new project. So we're gonna do a new project. And when you select to make a new project, you're given options of what is your render pipeline going to be. So the 3D pipeline used to be the built-in renderer, but more and more this is being deprecated. And I don't recommend using it anymore. You should use one of the new pipelines. So for here, you have two options. You have something called Universal Render Pipeline. So this is a very customizable and I would say good for mobile, which essentially is what you want to use if you're gonna make a mixed reality or AR project, because it's lightweight and you can customize the shaders quite a lot compared to the built-in pipeline that was quite optimized as well, but not so much ability to customize shaders. Now, if you're gonna go for virtual reality, I recommend using this high definition render pipeline, which brings all the interesting effects, also very powerful when it comes to calculating real-time shading or reflections. But this is not something you can do on a mobile device. You would need like a proper big machine with proper video cards and obviously the VR headset. Now, for what we're doing, we're gonna look into this universal render pipeline because it's more targeted at mobile. And again, most mixed reality experiences, people will either do it from a tablet, or maybe if they get something like a HoloLens. Now, I know Apple is working on something as well. They've been working on it for a while, but I think that's gonna be the first real good one for augmented reality. So anyway, that's what we're gonna use, the universal render pipeline. Let's give it a name. I know I'm gonna look at the house, so why not give it the name of a house? So we're gonna start Unity. I'm using the latest version. I always recommend that you use the latest version. Don't go into beta or pre-release. They are for expert users, tend to be buggy. So use a stable release for what you're developing. So I guess we've covered the texturing process. I've showed you a few options. Now, I also showed you a bit on exporting. So what I was telling you, try to mesh everything before you export. And exporting to parts, that would be my recommendation. Exporting to parts and think a bit how you want to do certain things. Now, on purpose, I didn't export a part of the model, which is this door. So we're gonna actually export it because we don't actually have it in Unity. I need this and this and this part. Okay, so this part I on purpose didn't export it. So we can go to the process of exporting this into Unity. All right, so it's now loading. How is everyone? Still there?
I'm here, yes.
Okay. So far, interesting.
So far, super interesting. It's so quite a few things. Of course, I've done it before, but quite a few things I did not know. For example, the universal pipeline when it's good to use, etc. Because Unity changed this not so long ago, right? With the
I think it was 2019.
high end.
Yeah, in 2019 they started to go down this route. And I know for sure, probably next year, they're gonna drop the old pipeline. Going forward is only gonna be either universal render pipeline or the high definition pipeline.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite, I would say it's the moment Unity gets very, very close to Unreal in terms of the quality of what you can do. They were lacking with their built-in renderer, the one that was previously developed. I don't think they stood a chance, but the thing is also Unreal, it's evolving. Like I guess everyone saw what they're doing with the latest. So it's always this cat and mouse. Yeah. Oh, I also hope it's interesting to see the process, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Understanding this part of, I think the important thing is to understand that game engines compared to the traditional workflow, when you would render in something like V-Ray or Arnold, or they have a different approach to how lighting and reflections and other things are calculated. And also they want as much as possible, the content you provide to be optimized for the specific rendering technique game engines use, which is not because I will call our architectural rendering is ray traced. So it's this very mathematical, precise models that you calculate how lighting is made and quite precise. But what game engines go into a different approach where it doesn't need to be 100% accurate. It has to look believable. And also because games usually tend to create worlds that are much larger than what we create in architecture, they assume you would provide assets that are optimized in both geometry and texturing, especially in texturing. I think one of the biggest mistakes I've seen made in architecture is this over providing. So especially very large textures. I remember colleagues giving me textures that were, I don't know, hundreds of megabytes large, and you go, "Whoa, you have so many pixels in here," but the screen you're rendering, it's either HD or, if you want, maybe 4K, right? So what you get on the screen, the best resolution is 4,000 pixels. So what's the point in trying to put the texture on an object that might represent, I don't know, 200 by 200 pixels on your screen to have a resolution that is 500 times bigger, right?
Yeah, there's no point. Yeah, it's because I think that's something that comes from the fact that we architects, we always think that we're gonna have to print A0s, you know, sheets, and they need to look very sharp. But yeah, on that point, you know, yeah, so this doesn't make any sense in a real-time engine where everything is about performance, right?
Exactly. So if you compare how large a 1,000 pixel image is compared to 2,000 pixels, it's already twice as large, right? And then if you go larger, and then you realize there's no point in having, like, let's say you get close, like close as I can get to this. On a 4K TV, if I look at the knob and I apply a texture, might be 4,000 pixels. That's the maximum you can do on a screen. Now, okay, maybe you project on a series of screens that are connected, you might get bigger resolutions. So I would say, don't go textures that are bigger than 4K. And in most cases, you don't even need that big. I would say 1,000 pixels for a texture is more than enough.
Okay. Yeah. Did you, I was just going to, on that point, you know, ask, did you see the keynote from James Tomkin on the first day?
No.
So it's he presented something on denoising images using neural nets. Something really impressive, because it means that you can have tiny little textures and you still get, for example, reflections and even refractions based on the denoising neural net.
You clean up the result, no?
You clean up the result very quickly. And something that has been developed for night shots, when you take night shots and they are very noisy because the lighting is very minimal, and then you run it and it just looks so beautiful. And it's quite amazing to see how effective it is. But it means that you can have even tinier, even smaller textures. And when you apply the denoising on runtime, it looks pretty sharp.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's important to know limits of the mediums. And again, like if you think mobile devices, even the most advanced iPhone right now, resolution is not so big. It's even smaller than your screen, you know, because it's a tiny device. It doesn't need that many pixels. Okay, now we are into Unity. I guess maybe a run through the interface to explain it a bit. So it's a 3D world that you look into. It seems infinite. It's not. I think it has something of 25 kilometers, or I can't remember the size, but there's actually a limit to it. And it's actually a cube, even though it looks infinite. Now, this world is populated with objects that live in a hierarchy. All objects in Unity are called game objects because it's a game engine. And all of them come with something called a transform component, which basically tells where that object lives in the world, right? X, Y, Z, and also rotation. Now in the interface, we see the world, we see the hierarchy, and then we see by default the inspector that gives you some information on the objects or the game objects more specifically. And then towards the bottom, we have the project where we have a few folders. And in here we have the things that we will use or the assets, okay? So what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring in that house. Now, I already shared with you a custom package that has already the house. So we're gonna go, we can right click, oops, import package, or you can go into assets, import package, custom package. So we're gonna get this house. Just I did it beforehand because it takes a while to import one by one, so I don't want people to just stay here importing, but we're gonna do the door to see the process, how you would actually do it. Now, if you go into scenes, there's a scene called house start. The house is actually in some random place, so you have to put it into 0. So the first thing you're gonna notice, it's showing pink. Okay, so this is actually because the materials are made in an older version of Unity, and I actually haven't converted them to the latest pipeline. So I'll show you first how to fix that. Now, as a common thing in Unity, whenever you have something that has an issue, it will show pink. Now, if you go to the materials, you're gonna see here all these materials being shown in pink. Select them all, go edit, rendering, materials, convert selected built-in materials to universal render pipeline. And this will take a bit of time, but essentially all the materials that were built for the previous pipeline will be converted to the universal render pipeline. There we go. Now it's looking much better. Lighting is not particularly fascinating, so I'm gonna get this directional light that is more or less our sun. I'm gonna move it a bit to the side and then get the rotation tool. Make sure as your axis, you're on the global, not the local, because locally it's already rotated. So I'm gonna change this to the global axis, and I'm gonna rotate my sun so I get a bit of shading on my main facade. Okay, cool. So now let's look a bit how the house is actually set up. So we have the house split into different parts. So I have, I guess at this point, I have my ground floor, I have my first floor, second floor, and the roof. And it's basically set up like this. So I could do an exploded axle. So I know I want to maybe create a script that will move these parts separately. So I split my object into parts. Now, if you actually look at the geometry, it's all separated, right? It's all parts that I manually put together. It's just that I group them. So for example, how do you do this? You would create an empty object. Let's call this house clone, for example. I would put this into the 0, 0, 0. And now what I could do, maybe get a few of these objects. It's also scaled differently. It doesn't matter. I think I scaled the 0.25. Anyway, wall 1, let's move it to the side. And how do you do this? So for example, if I want to do my first floor, I would create another empty object. Let's call this first floor or ground. And I can make this a child of my house by dragging it over. And you see now it's sort of indented. So for example, if I want the wall, itself to be part of the ground floor, the way to do it, you drag and you hold it over the object that you want it to be its parent. Now my ground floor has this wall 1 as a child, right? Somewhere in here, there should be the staircase. So for example, if I bring that in, I'm just gonna move it somewhere here. So this wall is moved to 7, oops. Let's say 30, something like that. So the stair, I will need to do the same. Remember the units. What was it? 7 minus 23. Well, or you can also manually place it. But anyway, if I want the stair to be part of the ground floor, I would need to drop it over the ground floor. And now my ground floor has these 2 objects, right? So this is how you compose things in Unity, right? You build them out of parts, and these parts are part of other parts. So I'm gonna delete this for now. So I have my house, and as I was saying, it's split into parts. Now I left on purpose the door. I didn't export it because I want to bring that door to show you the process. So remember what I was saying. So a good idea might be to assign some materials to this object. So we have the door frame, right? And the door itself. So if I want to have different materials for them, I would need to create them. So I'm gonna make a custom material, door frame, and I'm gonna assign this to the object. And probably a good idea just to see it, I'm gonna give it a color. Okay, then the door itself, I'm gonna make a new custom material. And again, let's give it a color. Okay, and now the last part is this ironmongery that, again, I'm gonna make a new custom material. And I guess it can stay white. All right, so now this object, I can export it as an APX. And this time I am going to map Rhino Z to FBXY. And I'm gonna keep the settings as simple as possible. So yeah, that's fine. All right, now I'm gonna go into Unity. And here in geometry, I'm actually gonna import this new geometry. So you can do import new asset, or you can go to asset, import new asset, both work. And we're gonna go and get this door. Okay, now I can enlarge this to see it a bit better here. You can control a few things when you import an object, but I'm gonna show you only 2 things that we need to control. We need to say to generate these light map UVs, and this is how Unity calculates lighting, and it's a second map channel. It's the second, so you have one map channel for the texture, and it creates a second channel for lighting information. Now, again, if I would be in 3D Max, I would manually create this and optimize it. Maybe I'll show you also how to do this, because it's if you ever get into optimization. But anyway, in Rhino, you don't have this option. Rhino only has one mapping channel, and that's it, unfortunately. So if you import something from Rhino, you have to generate these light map UVs. Yeah, I guess that's it. we'll leave it like that. Let's bring this here. And it has some weird pivot point, which is not great. I am gonna fix that into Rhino actually. So I need to move this object into the origin. And this is again something, unfortunately, you can't do in Rhino. You can't set the UV point. The pivot point is always gonna be the origin. But I can move my my project to the origin, which should fix that. I'll need to re-export it. Okay, so it should be now in the origin. Okay, so I'm gonna export this again. Because I don't want my pivot point to be away from the object. I want it to actually be with the object. So I can go on the door and say re-import, which essentially, let me delete that. Oh, nice. It comes with cameras for some reason. Oh, let's do something because I don't want cameras. So I'm gonna actually export it as an OBJ. Yeah, and I want to map Rhino Z to OBJY. Okay. Let's delete this. And I'm gonna import it again. Type. Funny, it's a 3D object. Yeah, but which one is the OBJ? I guess it's the one with the later dates. No? Okay, looks better. Generate light map UVs. Okay, let's scale it because I think my house actually scaled 0.25. Yeah. Oh, even smaller. I can eyeball it. Okay, so we now have our object nicely into position. It lost the materials when I did it as OBJ. Well, anyway, I'm gonna do as a material, I'm gonna apply one of the materials I already have. So maybe let's try this. It's a bit large. Better. Yeah, why not? Okay, cool. So we brought in a geometry as well. So we now have a complete model. So the door, I know it needs to be part of the ground floor. So I can just go and do it as a child of the ground floor. And there we go. Now my house is complete. Okay, we've looked at importing geometry, also texturing. Now, we haven't talked a lot about the materials, but essentially the materials, you control them using textures, and I think that's the best way to control them. So as you saw, for example, I have this custom-made texture, which is for the walls, and it's custom map for that. You can see, besides the color map, I also have a normal map. So a normal map you can generate in something like Photoshop, or I use something called XNormal that generates this, which gives a bit of depth. So if I go close to the material, you see it has a bit of depth. Now it has to be fixed because the material itself, I think the normal map intensity, it's a bit too much. So I could do maybe 0.01. Yeah, something like 2 maybe, which still gets a bit of three-dimensionality, but not too much, right? And this is what's important, because you get for free details using normal maps, as if the geometry had a bit of extra 3D mesh, but it doesn't. And that's why it's important to make sure you have all these textures, even something like an occlusion material. Now, advanced materials will have always a normal map, an occlusion map, maybe a reflectivity map, and that dictates to the render engine from Unity how to render things. Okay. All right. So let's pimp up a bit our house, because it is lit by our general sun, but it's not the nicest lighting. Like the interiors look quite dumb, and there's nothing inside. So let's look at some of the lights we have in Unity. So we're gonna go into create lights, or you can also get them game object light. So we're gonna use a point light. That's probably my most used light for interiors, at least, because you can control it quite well. So let's place maybe on the interior on this floor, and we're gonna control this a bit. So what we want to do is change the size. So we're gonna increase the range, maybe too much. Something like this. And I'm gonna increase the intensity to make it more obvious. And I generally combine warm and cold lights. So for example, this is a warm light, right? It has a bit of this yellowish tone. Okay, so I'm gonna duplicate it, Control D. And I think the trick is to always mix, not to have all of them the same color. So if you introduce a bit of color variation, I find, for example, these yellows go quite well with warm magentas, but again, this is something you can play with. So again, I'm gonna start to add inside my house some of these. Maybe this one is a bit too intense. Okay, I think that already makes it a lot more interesting, right? Like if you look at the object by itself with some of these lights, you start to get a lot more interesting spaces. And I think that's the trick with when you create environments, to mix and match. Like, okay, I have my general light that lights the whole scene. But I think you can create something a lot more interesting if you start to add lights. Now, these lights, I will make them also children of the house, because I kind of want them to move with the house, right? So when I move the house, I want the lights to go together, okay? And if anything, I could have even created an empty object and say lights and add them there. But anyway, I've added them there. Okay, now let's look at what's happening there. Let's look at creating an environment. Okay, so to do that, we're gonna use the terrain tools from Unity. So the easiest way to do it, you can go game object and you can create something called a terrain object in 3D objects, which is fairly useful. The thing is, you don't have much control over it. Once you've created, you can go into terrain settings and set the size, how big you want it. But I think this is not my preferred way, because it's kind of like, there you go, a big terrain, deal with it. So we're gonna use some tools that Unity provides. And for that, we need to go to something called the package manager. The first thing we need is not visible, so you have to go from the package manager to look for the Unity registry. And in here, we're going to search for terrain. So we see here terrain tools, you have to install them. So hopefully that gets going. Okay, so now that has been installed. It's not really obvious where it was installed. So if you go to window, you now have another new window called terrain. And you have something called the terrain toolbox. I'm gonna actually dock it next to the inspector because it's useful to use. So now I can control a bit how this terrain works. So I don't want a really large terrain, maybe something like 300 meters by 300 meters, because I want to make more or less like a diorama. And I guess maybe show you how a diorama looks. So my goal is to create something similar to this type. So I assume I'm gonna present my model as some type of a diorama. And I don't know if you ever saw any of this, but they're kind of like little small models that you play with. I find them probably the pinnacle of model making, because some of them can get quite detailed. Like people go very detailed into rendering water and doing all sorts of things in these dioramas. Really cool things to have. If you ever see some of these made, they're quite spectacular. Anyway, we're gonna create a digital diorama. So I want to create this terrain, not too large, maybe even 300 meters might be too much. Let's try 250. Well, and then I also want to say enable auto generate lighting for this. So also you can go into terrain settings in here, also all sorts of terrain utilities. But for now, don't worry about that. We just want to control the size and also the position. So its start position, I want it to be offset to be in the center of the house. So it will be 125 and 125. So where is my terrain? Huh? Ah, okay, it's still generating. Yeah, I placed it in the wrong spot. But anyway, I guess it would have been 0 and 0. No. Ah, it would have been minus 125. There we go. So now I have my terrain for this house, which I think is probably, that's the size we want if it's a diorama. Even for this, it's a bit too large, but I guess it could be a bigger diorama. You know what? I am gonna make a smaller version because I really want it to be. So if I do 100 by 100 and offset it minus 50 by minus 50, maybe that's too small. Okay, so we'll do 150. So that's minus. Yeah, that's a decent size of a terrain. Okay, now that I have the terrain, I can start to use my tools, and the tools go from left to right, and you have all sorts of things from painting and sculpting the terrain to other tools. Now, the thing is, the default brushes and things you can do, they're kind of limited, and they don't really give us many textures and things. And again, for that, we're gonna bring in a new package. Now, this time, I'm gonna actually look at my assets because I already have it. But in case you don't have it, you guys can go to Unity Asset Store. This is where you get assets for Unity. So we're gonna search for terrain tools. And it always shows you the paid ones, but we want the ones from Unity. Okay, so let's do the easier way to find it. We search for the standard assets, which are made by Unity Technologies. If you click on Unity Technologies, it will show you all the packages they have made. And the package you want is this one, Terrain Sample Asset Pack. So this is made by Unity. It's very high quality, and it's quite useful to generate terrains, to paint them, to sculpt them. So you probably, if you don't have it, you need to get this one. It's free, so it wouldn't cost anything. We'll say you open in Unity, which gets you exactly where I am. And then you have to download and then import. I'm gonna import this. So essentially, this gives us extra tools, textures and brushes for creating the terrain, which expands a bit on the tools that are built in, the standard ones. Okay, I know with Zoom I have to sometimes check this. Is everyone still there?
Yeah, sure. I am here.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if
No,
Gheorghiu.
I'm checking because sometimes I disconnect, and yeah, there we go. And we have also
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I can also talk to you guys about this imports. So far, interesting.
Super interesting for me. Very interesting. And it looks like you have tools that are in Unity that are similar, very similar to the different tools you have in Unreal. It seems to be, it's always one playing catch up with the other one, right?
Yeah, and I think not only that, but I think once you learn one, you're good for the other one. that's the
Yeah, yeah, they're
that's the
very
nice thing.
similar.
That once you learn the workflow,
Mhm.
it's gonna be exactly the same. And I find it again, like that's what I'm saying also to my students. Start in Unity and then progress to Unreal. I think the learning curve is a bit more friendly,
Mhm.
and what you learn is applicable. Okay, so now we are importing this. So yeah, sorry, these parts usually take time. Nothing I can do. But how about
Yes,
compared to the workshops? Like, is this the type of workshop you had in mind, or?
yes, yes, yeah, absolutely. So this is similar to the workshop delivered by Fadil, which was very hands-on. In fact, you know, that I'm every time we run a conference, you know, like this is the third year we're running the design computation conference. So it's a very young conference. I learn how to better organize the conference, how to categorize activities and so on. And I've been writing here that we have workshops that are very hands-on. Normally they get quite a good uh, rating. People love them. But this year we had a workshop that was more at business level, which
Mhm.
was the timetable simulation and what are the problems, the issues with railways timetable simulation and creating parametric timetables.
Wow.
But that was more like business level, almost like a roundtable
Mhm.
business discussion. So there is a variety, but this is, I think, the original classic workshop hands-on where, you know, I can open my Unity and play with you.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's important. I find that also that you don't get much time with people that actually use this day to day, and you
Mhm.
can't find this stuff on YouTube either. You sometimes find it, but it's hard to find. Yeah. Okay, so we've imported that. When we've imported the terrain assets, you get a small error. It's actually a problem of the pipeline. So again, because Unity evolved these render pipelines quite often, it's an easy fix. You see package was not resolved dependencies. It shows you where the error is. You have to upgrade the pipeline. Um, it's the nature of these constantly evolving frameworks. But the good things, you can hit the upgrade, um, and you will do its thing. I can still do stuff while it's upgrading, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I think I can still do. Okay, so we're here now at the terrain level. So we're presented with the first tab. So the first tab allows us to grow our terrain. So for example, if I want to expand, I can add tiles. And this is why game engines are really fast at rendering things. And it's also clever to set up tiles that are not too large, because basically tiles get loaded as you look at them, right? So all the geometry that lives on a tile will get loaded if you look at it. And also sometimes with level of detail. So if a tile is further away, the resolution of it downgrades. And that's why you can do things like this. You can have scenes with millions of trees, or you can have scenes with complex urban cities. Which again, if you try to do something like this in any platform we use, traditionally it's impossible. And I know for a fact, when we were doing the Apple campus, it was such a large building, there was nothing we could load the model in, not 3D Max, not Maya, nothing, with all the textures and plants and everything. It just wouldn't work. So that's actually the first experience in Foster and Partners of using game engines. It was the Cry engine to load the model. And it was this wow moment where you were like, wow, we could actually load it. And the reason it's able to do it is because of how it's set up as a set of tiles, right? So you have these various parts that sit on tiles, and when the camera looks at them, they get loaded or unloaded. Which I guess that's the first thing in the terrain. It allows you to create tiles. Now the geometry, when you assign it to a tile, it will automatically load and unload, but you have to do that manually because you have to tell what object belongs to what tile. And it's with this child parent part. Okay, unfortunately, it seems like this upgrading takes a bit longer. But at least I showed you where this thing is. It's again one of those things that you won't find so easily online, or why that error comes. It works also. It's not like it doesn't work, but it throws you a small error.
Yes, yeah, that's super interesting. I remember when I was doing my graphics, masters in computer graphics, we had to go through the different loading methods for real time. So I don't know if you came across this, the clouding and partitioning and the different algorithms to load geometry. Otherwise, yeah, as you said, it simply won't work. I think it's really amazing to see it working in a laptop or in a desktop computer, and it looks quite realistic. But
even more impressive, you can load it on mobile devices. That
yeah, at runtime, right? Sometimes you have like the pop-up art, those pop-up advertisement, and they are a little game, right? You
yeah,
can play, and they load in what, milliseconds?
yeah, which is how much it evolved, and you can imagine this keeps improving. And again, I that's why I am quite certain that the future will be some of these digital components in real life, and not through the medium of a screen. That we already do, right? But you kind of have this thing, and people, you can see them on the street walking and typing, and I think the technology for mixed reality is not yet there, but it will get. Like, given the prototypes I've seen, I would say in 5 years or so, you might have like mainstream, real good mixed reality hardware. Now, again, all the parts that are coming along with all sorts of ethic questions, and those are interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some prototypes for, nice glasses, beautiful
there were
glasses.
already, the Google glasses, they did it initially, and it was not exactly well received for privacy issues. So all these things will be kind of interesting.
Yes, yeah. The Google, I was talking to Google, and they are working on contact lenses, but it's just to present data. I don't think it's just like a overlaying data. It doesn't interact with the environment, so it doesn't map the environment. But
it's true.
Yeah, it's advancing very quickly. So
I would say so. Give it 5 years, I will be surprised. Okay, so I fixed that part, and now we can get into our terrain. Okay, so the first tab was what I was showing you, the fact that we can add to it. Okay, now let's get to our painting. So we have in here, from the drop down, our first thing is raise and lower the terrain. Okay, so this gives us the opportunity to modify our terrain. Now, it matters quite a lot where you put your terrain. So right now I can't lower it more than it's set. So what I'm gonna do, I'm actually gonna set this terrain a bit lower than it is right now. So maybe -10, something like that, or -15 to give us a bit of space. Okay, that's okay. And now I can start to go into it and go and raise the height. Now it works quite intuitively. When you press, it goes and it raises the part that you pressed on. If you hold Control, it lowers it. if you hold shift, it sort of smooths out what you've done. Okay, now you have a few more tools that more shortcuts that you need to be aware. So the first one is the size of your brush. So if you press S and you move the mouse, you can control the size of the brush. And with A, you can control the opacity or the strength. I'm gonna set the strength quite low because you saw I was pushing quite fast everything. So I'm gonna start to, and again, like it's a bit too strong, this, so I'm gonna reduce this even more. Yeah, so this way I can control quite well what I'm doing. So I want to first create some type of a border around my object. I find that quite relaxing to do this, painting the environment. So I'm gonna go something like an axle view, so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm raising somehow to create borders around. And I guess one part can be larger, so I can increase my strength of the brush. So maybe that's more like a, I don't know, it could be some type of a hue, I guess. Okay. So I've created some type of a valley. Now, I know the height I need here under the house. So there is actually a set height too. And you can actually say what the height is. And it's a bit big, the brush again. So under my house, I need to set the size. I'm gonna create a space that's a bit more flat where my house lives. Okay, and now I'm gonna go again into my tool set and try to sculpt that there is a void. So I'll put a bit of water maybe there. So, and again, with I can smooth the edges. Something like this is like a hard edge, doesn't look so nice. Oh, sorry. I've done it really wrong, but that could be where the water is. Fine. Okay, so maybe here. All right. Looks like a good lake. Okay, now what we want to do at this point, we want to go into sculpt effects. So I'm gonna use a bit of noise. So I want to sort of make this terrain look a bit irregular. So again, I'm gonna use a bit, have also the tool opacity is a bit too big. These are also very interesting tools to use because, for example, this one automatically creates ridges. So I kind of use it as a way to define the regions of this. Okay, let's look at other brushes in here. Okay, starting to look more interesting. I'll probably end up moving the house a bit back, but I have created the space for the water. I'm starting to like how this mountain looks. I'll spend too much time on it. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Okay, it's up to you. You can spend ages on this type of thing. I tend to find myself doing this quite a lot till I get something that looks nice enough. Oh, okay. Now I want to show you some of my favorite effects, because you have the brush size is very small here, so we need to raise it. Oh, sorry. Now it's too strong. So I want to add a bit of contrast, especially where the mountain part is, to really make it feel as if it's a mountain type of texture, I guess. And also for the river bed, I guess. Oh, sorry. We might want to get again one of our noise maps. Okay. Now there is also, where is it? Erosion, yes. So we want a bit of hydraulic erosion. I'm gonna get this and make it a bit smaller. So I know for sure around here, we want this effect of water having eroded a bit the bed of where this sits. Then you have some wind erosion maybe. Again, I'll use the noise map. Okay, I think we're almost there. A bit more texturing, so it's not without formations, and I think maybe that's fine. Okay, so the last thing again, I'm gonna go and set height. And this time I really want to make it just under the house. like a zone where the house can stay. How much do I need? I guess I need a bit more. Okay, let's move the house. Yeah. And I guess to make it interesting, I might also rotate it that is facing this direction. Oh. Okay, now the only thing left is to fix these really awkward edges that are here. And I can use from here we have something called smooth height. I'm just gonna fix those hard edges that wouldn't exist in reality. Okay, and then we can go to that erosion effect, hydraulic, use the noise map. Yeah, there we go. All right, so we've created the topography. I guess it looks fairly interesting. I need to push the house a bit back. Seems like it has one part flying over. Oops. Cool. Let's do the next step. So we have our terrain, but it doesn't look that interesting with this checker pattern. So after you finished painting the height, you can actually paint the textures. So we're gonna go in here, paint texture. So in here, the first thing is you have to set up layers. So right now there is no layer, and it's a bit counterintuitive because it works opposite to Photoshop. So in Photoshop, the layer at the top is the first to be rendered, and the layer at the bottom the last. In here it works the opposite. The layer at the top is the last to be rendered, and the layer at the bottom is the top. So we have to think like, what is the base? So we're gonna add the layer, and in here we have a few textures, and I think my base should be, I guess something like a rock, terrain, because those are the mountains. So I think it's gonna be, yeah, just this one, the rock. So that's gonna be my base. It will take a bit to populate on the whole object. There we go. So now that's my base. Now I need to start to put more layers. So I think as you go from the top of the mountain, you're gonna start to go to something that's a mixture of rock and grass, and then some type of mud when you get into the water. So again, I'm gonna add those layers. So the next layer, and it's really important to plan the layers ahead because you're gonna paint them. So the next one is this sort of rock, but with a bit of soil. Okay. And then from there, we're gonna go into a mixture of grass and moss, maybe. And then I can also add the clean grass. something like this. And then I'm gonna have mud. Tidal, yeah, let's use some mud. Okay, so let's start to paint. So we know we want the top of the mountain to be the one that is more or less like the one having the rock. So as you go lower, I'm already gonna start to get this. And whenever I'm in a taller spot, I might just keep the rocks. Well, here I'm already past the rocks, so I can start to paint them in. Now, if I want to bring back the rock, I can just go and fix it, right? So after the rocks, we said we're gonna do these green sides, which I think we can keep them to these type of zones. So already our terrain is starting to come to life, right? It's starting to look a lot more interesting. I think this part could be that mixture. Maybe my size of the brush reduced a bit. And then let's do the grass. Probably the flat parts could be that type of clean grass. And then we can do the mud only on the base here. Now I know I want to set the water to be quite high, so I'm gonna try to get the mud accurately painted. Well, imagine doing this as a real diorama. That actually would be quite fun.
Octavian, Mikhail is asking, can the terrain be also generated from height maps or
Yes.
GIS data?
Yes, it's a good question. So you have that option to actually import yourself height maps. So let me remember what it is. Flat maps. You're going to import height maps, and there are a few formats actually acceptable that you can bring in. So you can definitely create it from height maps, and actually there are professional tools for creating terrain. And also you can export from GIS exactly to have actual terrain. So yeah, what I'm doing here doesn't have to be manual. It can definitely be something that you import. Yeah, good question. Okay, I think we're almost there. Maybe some of that rock in this part. Okay, I'm happy with that. I think it's probably enough for this. All right, now the missing element, it's a bit of water. These dioramas always have water somehow. And I'm gonna show you a small trick for that. So I'm gonna use another asset, which you can get from the asset store, which I find it to be probably the best water, simple water shader, which you can find on the asset store. And it's again one of the free ones. Is this one, which you can get for your project. Let's go to Unity. Actually, I'm gonna save my scene. And for now, I'm gonna go, and also the other good thing to do is to bring a more exciting environment. We have the most bland skybox, but we can change that. Though in a mixed reality, this wouldn't matter, because in mixed reality, you would actually will have no background. In reality, that's what you would see in mixed reality, right? The background would be replaced by an actual thing that you place on. So this could be a table or whatever it is. So I guess we'll leave it without the background. Now my light, I think I want to increase a bit the intensity. Okay. Maybe change also the. Yeah, that's quite a nice scene. Okay, so let's bring that water. So we're gonna go into the package manager. And yeah, we can import everything. I'll show you how it works, because it's quite a clever setup. And that's why I like it. It basically creates an extra camera that is used to calculate reflections, because reflections are one of the most expensive things to compute. So yeah, it does it in a very clever way. Get a small error. Save the scene. It might not be such a big error, but I'll show you how it looks. So basically, that's why I like this. It's quite a clever. Oh, I need. Yeah, there we go. So basically, what you have your main camera, but you also have a secondary camera that just looks at the scene to create reflections. Oh, that's also the funny thing. When you are in Zoom, it takes your top of the screen. So when you go in play mode, the secondary camera, it's used to pick up the reflections and add it to the scene. Okay, so let's check this error to see what it is. It's nothing. So what type of water do we want? Maybe, well, I guess we can make one from here. What we would need, let's go to our scene. It's regenerating the terrain. Okay, so we have here in the prefabs a water block that we could place in our scene. and I'm gonna scale it. Come on. That is more or less the same size as the oh, maybe it's too big because we don't want it to come out of that size, no? Or we could raise the terrain there.
Yeah.
I think I raised the terrain in that part. Okay, let's do that. Okay, there we go. But it's not finished because you also need this camera, which you actually need to put it to look at the scene more or less, because it's the one that will generate the reflections. Okay, so now let's go fix our terrain so we don't have water coming out of it. Okay. Oh, too strong. Oh, that can be there, and why not? That could also be there. Let's add some erosion. Okay, cool. Nicely tucked away. Okay, at this point, I think what I want to do is maybe set a viewpoint for the start of the experience. So I think when you start, you could actually look at the object. So you have to think a bit what the first thing someone will see. So a bit rotated. Maybe something like that. Okay, and again, like there's some things you have to set up, like basically the what it sees, you won't be the actual environment. You will see black all around. But anyway, when you start to play the game, you'll get this nicer looking water with these effects. So it will be an interesting experience. It will be like some type of little diorama. But okay, so I covered also now the terrain and environment. And I think with this, you have a good understanding of at least how these things would work. So we have our environment. It's a decent experience, I would say. It has a bunch of errors. Probably it's that water plane, but I don't have the patience to see what the error is. Okay, now let's think of a user interface. So I would say most interfaces will be some type of, let's say, voice would be ideal, but maybe you're on a tablet, then the easiest way to do it is something with buttons, right? So how do we do that? So we have already a built toolset for this. So the first thing you have to think how the user interface works. So user interface is like a layer that gets rendered on top of everything you see. So first you need to make something called a canvas. So the canvas, think of it as literally a very last, almost like a piece of paper you add on top of everything you've rendered. Now, you won't see the canvas. It's shown in real scale here. It's like an infinite plane, but it will actually be on the game displayed. So what I'm gonna go is maybe add first a button. So I'm gonna try to do an exploded axle, something that you click on button and you explode the house, right? So for that, I'm gonna go and make myself a button. So I need to also import this part with the texture mesh. I don't need examples and extras, but basically that's gonna be my button. It's not the most exciting button, but it's there. You can control how it looks, the color. You can control what it says as text. Maybe explode could be the text. Now, what I found interesting is that you are all architects, so probably you hate the way this button looks. So I know for sure I can get much nicer icons. Let's do something like a PNG. Or if you're like me, you'd probably end up designing your icons, but I want to show you at least the process of how this looks fairly okay. This is much more interesting. Or yeah, there we go. That's a cute one. So I'm gonna use this icon. I think it's much more interesting. So for that, what I'm gonna go into Unity. And in here, I'm gonna go into my textures. Or let's make a new folder. Let's call this user interface. I'm gonna import new assets. Where did I save it? Download the textures, makes sense. Okay, so I want to use that instead of this ugly button, but when you import it, it comes as a JPEG, as a texture. So what we need to change is texture type. To change it from default, we need to make it a sprite, which is already telling you it's used for 2D and user interfaces. Apply. Now, wasn't it a PNG? I thought it was a PNG. Yeah. Let's see. So if I go in my button and from here change to the, it should show in here. Ah, there we go. It's just squashed. Okay, so we have to fix that. So we're gonna do it 160 pixels by 160 pixels. Maybe that's too big. let's say maybe 100 by 100. Okay, and now let's anchor it that it lives in the top corner. So, and move it a bit to the side, maybe 100. Actually, I guess I can put it somewhere here. There we go. So that's gonna trigger the explode. So what we want to do, I guess the color, should we keep it? I guess we keep it black, so we don't get those funny artifacts. I'm gonna change the text to be underneath because the position of it now overlaps with the actual icon. Also, it's using this font, but I don't like the color. I'm gonna go and make it black, or yeah, let's make it black. Liberation, interesting font. I wouldn't use that font, but anyway. Now let's change the behavior of the button. So when you're highlighting it, I don't know, let's make it orange. And when you press it, let's make it a dark orange. So this could be a lighter orange. Okay. So let me show you how that works. We're going to play mode. No, it's not doing it. It's not even recognizing. Interesting. Why? Is it because of all this error? Ah, I know why. Okay, so we have this additional camera. That you have to give, which is the reflection plane, and it's this water block. Well, that fixed the problem, but still my button is not working. Why? Let's see if a regular button works. So it's kind of working, but it's kind of like not picking up, I guess. Yes, this works as well, but it's not picking up though. Well, anyway, what I want to show you is how you actually make it do something. So I'm actually gonna keep this button as well, and I'm gonna assign the script to both of them. So I'm gonna do a very simple script that takes our house and explodes it, right? So our house is made of all these parts, and I guess that's when the lights should actually be put into the proper. So this one should go on the second floor, no? Then when and this one should go on the first floor. So I can move them together. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, when I explode it, I need to go from where the position is. So you see it's now at 0, 0, right? So I need to figure out a position for this. So maybe, let's say this goes to 100, right? And then, I don't know, second floor might go to something like, oops. So that goes 100, and then second floor will go to something like maybe 50, I guess. So we could do something like that. And I guess I could explode even the other floor. But anyway, so one goes to 100 and the other one goes to 50. So the roof, I forgot the second floor. Yeah, so probably second floor would have been, okay. So the roof goes to 100. Second floor to something like 75. And first floor can go to something like, I don't know, 50. But anyway, that's where I want them to be. So I need to make a small script to do that. And it's not so hard to do a script. What did I do? Yeah, these have to go into our first floor. All right, so we're gonna make an empty game object. We're gonna call this game manager. Okay, so this is a dummy object that is gonna hold a script for us. So I don't remember if I've made it. No, I haven't made it. So I need a scripts folder. So in here, I'm gonna create a new C# script. And we're gonna call this game manager. And instantly Unity recognizes this is something that you're gonna use to control the game. It changes its icon. And I'll show you how we do it. Okay. So first we need to select the game object that's called game manager, and we need to drag this component, the game manager script, to it. And now if you double click on its name, you can start to write a bit of code. So we know the parts of the house are 4, right? So it has 4 parts, but in reality, we're gonna actually move just the roof, the second floor, and the first floor. The ground, we don't actually need to move it. So I need to make somehow a reference to those objects. And we know that all of those are game objects. So we need to somehow bring them to this script. Now, in order to be actually able to link them, we need in our script to tell that these objects are visible. So they need to be public. So I need, what was it? First floor. Then I need also second floor. And I need also a third roof, actually. Sorry. And it's not the roof floor, it's just the roof. Okay, now if I save this, and I go into Unity, it will compile. And if I go to my game manager, now I have 3 references in here. So I can now drag my first floor in here, my second floor in here, and my roof in here. Okay, now they're referenced, so I can control them from the script. Now, the start function, as it's written here, is called once at the beginning of the game. Okay, and then there's an update function that it's updated every frame. Now, I need to somehow control if my object is exploded or not, right? So for that, I'm going to have a private, because this is not something I need to see outside of the script. And I'm going to use something called Boolean. And I'm going to set it that it's false. So when the game starts, this model is not exploded. Okay, so now I have in update, I will ask if it's exploded or not. Or I could make two functions that maybe I don't even need to call, because I don't need to call a refrain. So I can actually delete this start function, and I can actually delete this update function. But what we're gonna do, we're gonna write an explode function. So this is the, and I need to make it public because I want to control it or call it from outside the script. So for this one, I'm going to say something like this. If exploded is false, so I need to make sure that we're actually in exploded mode, so I wouldn't move more than I need my object. Then I will need to say exploded now is true, because I just exploded the house. And then I'll do first floor so we need to get our first floor and translate it. Now I want to show you also something quite useful. This should be scripting references, scripting API. So this is the scripting in Unity. It's quite well documented and is very useful to use. So I know I want to translate. So if I search for the translate, which I spelled very badly, again, something with my keyboard. Okay, that's the function I want. And actually, it's not even this. I want another one. I want game object translate. It? That's the one I want. Well, we can also write it ourselves. Right, so transform, and I think if I don't spell it wrong, I need to say by how much. So we know we're gonna go first one 50. $25. Oops. And then 100 for the roof. Okay. So that's what happens if it's exploded. If I click again, so let's assume our object has already been exploded, then I will need to do the opposite. Exploded would be false. and I will need to translate these the opposite direction. So minus, minus, minus. Okay. So we need to check what state we are. Are we exploded or not? If we are not exploded, then we move the objects up. If we are exploded, we move the objects down. Hope that makes sense. Yes, because I am using the wrong thing. Aha. So I need to actually put yeah, I think I put it correctly. What did I do wrong? Ah, I know. Oh no, it's my spelling. Transform. Okay. Perfect. Okay, so now we actually have to activate that script. So the way we do it, we're gonna go to the button, and then you have on-click behavior. So I'm going to add a behavior. I'm gonna put my game manager, and from the game manager, I am going to use the explode function. Okay, and well, I'm gonna do it on the other button as well. Okay, link in the game manager, explode function. Now everything should work. Let's see. Oh, it did, but well, I think I moved them very far. I got the numbers wrong anyway. It does work. I just need to fix the numbers. So I think, let me try. Okay, much better. I guess we don't need this extra button. We can deleted. And I guess that's it. I think that I kind of covered everything I wanted to cover. And I hope this was somehow enjoyable. I think I can pull my camera a bit out. So actually I see the model when it's exploded as well. Something like that, yeah. So yeah, let's just do it here. Oh. Still some error, but anyway, it seems to work also without. There we go.
Oh, that's cool. It's amazing that you can do all of this in such a short period of time.
And you can imagine now this camera is actually linked to your HoloLens or something, right? Yeah. So you move, and I guess in the HoloLens you would do some gesture or maybe just say it, you know? Mm-hmm. So I just want to show you how much this has evolved because, for example, the prototype I showed you at the beginning, it took me a couple of weeks to sort out how everything should work. And I remember also the first generation of HoloLens, there was no API for it, so you had to write your own things. So just to get that to work, it took a couple of weeks or maybe months. And now you can just plug it in, you know, like you build this, plug it in, API, it's already there, link things up, and yeah, you're good to go. Also on a tablet as well, there is proper APIs, right? Like you have the Apple AR SDK, you have Google AR SDK. It's all there. You don't have to do anything. You just have to build this, link it to the proper APIs, and that's it. And you get access to all those nice things. So for Apple, you have, if you have a depth sensor, like all of them have now, the tablets, the iPhones, it recognizes space. You can link objects to certain, I guess, like a table or something. So yeah. That's amazing. And also, I think it's also important to understand the limitations of the graphics. Now, what I showed you, these are basic graphics, but you can do a lot more. Like the truth is, for mobile, you can get amazing graphics. Like I just barely scratched on the top because I showed you how to use textures, but you can use custom shaders that have interaction with lighting and so on. So yeah, I hope at least people who see this will get excited. And yes, it's definitely a very good introduction to Unity, I think, you know, to get into Unity development for mixed reality, right? Yeah, there was one more thing I want to show which I forgot. So okay, so we can also paint besides the terrain. We can paint all sorts of objects, right? So especially trees, which I also think they bring a lot of reality. So you can go and edit your components. So you need to actually plug in things. Now, I haven't brought those in yet, but I did share with you some other things in there. So I'm gonna import those to show you at least that part. So there is a custom package that I shared, which are terrain assets. So we're gonna bring a few trees to make this scene come alive, because I think that's what it was missing a bit. I don't want to bring this editor, and I don't want to bring this physics. I want the trees only. And I don't want the water or the terrain assets. I just want the trees. Okay, so I'm gonna import those trees, and we'll make this look a bit nicer. Guess we can still stay for a bit longer. Now, when you import the trees, you have to rebuild them, unfortunately. And this is because it's an older version, but it's kind of easy to do. So if you go to standard assets, environments, trees. So first thing we have to do is the materials, same as I showed you. So you're going to edit, rendering, materials. We should have convert to URP. And you see these are 3 levels of details, and this is how far you are from the tree.
Mm-hmm.
So those are done for LOD1. Same we have to do here. For LOD2. And one more to convert. Where are you? Okay. I might use one more tree, so we don't have just one. If they had a repeat last command, it would be amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. They don't have a shortcut for or repeat.
Yeah, they do have an automated one, but it's I think it will take longer because you will search for all the materials and convert them, which it will just take. Yes, so last one, rendering. Okay, now we need to also rebuild our tree. Apply and generate materials. Come on. There we go. So that's fixed. This one has been fixed as well. And there was the conifer. Well, now we can go to our terrain. Edit trees, add tree. We're gonna go and add this one here. Come on. Okay, and then we want to add one more. Actually, no, it was a conifer mobile. Okay, so with that, if we go to our terrain, there is automated way to do it. So we can randomize a bit the heights. Okay, and there was a button to automatically populate them. Okay, a bit too many. Let's reduce the density.
Oh, they are quite detailed.
Yeah. this really brings it to life. And I think my LODs are wrong. You see the
yeah, as you zoom out, it's not loading.
Yeah, it's okay. It's probably an easy one to fix. Okay, let's fix that. Something in here is wrong. Okay, so it's missing a texture. Let me remember the name though. So conifer something. Okay. There we go. And there is also something quite nice you can do. There is something called the wind zone. If I can find it. Yeah, wind zone. That will slowly move our trees. Okay, so we've added the trees, and there is a bit more you can do actually. There is something called billboards or details. So in here, you can do something like grass. And in here we can search for some grass. And it works similarly to the other ones. You kind of go and you paint your grass details, which for some reason doesn't show up. Ah, it does. I've painted a lot of it. Okay, let's remove some of it. I think my opacity is way too big. I just want to add a bit of it. And you see, it's quite clever. Once you go away from it, it takes it out. So it's faster to render. My texture is wrong for the grass. That's why. I think I have to edit details, edit. Because you need
It's the first one.
No, I think I didn't import it. Maybe. Yeah. There we go. But yeah, there you go. Some grass.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and when you go into play mode, all of that is animated. So it picks up the wind effects. So it really brings it to life. I forgot about this part.
Oh yeah, you can see.
It's a bit extreme, the wind, but the grass moves as well. So I don't know, you can imagine this being quite a fun little experience in the mixed reality medium.
Yeah.
I'll stop it there. So let's say it's been 3 hours.
Yes, absolutely. More than 3 hours, Octavian, but that's pretty great. It's really, really interesting. I also would like to experience this in like just, augmented reality.
Well, you guys have one of those devices.
Yeah, we do. Oh, and I meant to say, virtual reality, just like fully immersive. That would be really cool because it looks like a nice place to be.
Yeah, the only thing if we would do for virtual reality, I would change from this pipeline, which is the render pipeline, into the more high definition, which I kind of started to do. Maybe I show you at least a preview. I didn't do much because I did first this URP version, which is for mixed reality. But I started those one for virtual reality. The thing is, the difference in graphics, it's so different. It's just everything looks more real, more contrast, more. It looks, yeah, it's a different thing. And it's because a virtual reality headset will be connected to a powerful machine. Though if you look at the Facebook one, then you still do the mobile version. Something more stylized, more simple, I guess.
For the metaverse, right?
Yes, I don't think for metaverse we're there to have very heavy models, but because of scale and also because the compute device, you want something without wires, so you can move freely, or streamed. But again, Google started to do the streaming with Stadia, and then they stopped. So there's no one developing streaming technology for virtual environments at the moment. Who knows? Maybe Facebook will. I don't know. Yeah. Well, anyway, it looks like it takes a while to load that thing. So, and I'll let whoever wants to explore how things will look in high definition and so on.
Oh yeah, it's there.
Yeah.
So this is the same scene you prepared previously?
Without anything, it's just I brought the house in. But you can already see, so first is much more snappy. And then the quality of the textures and the lighting is different. And imagine this one has nothing done. Like I didn't play with lights. I didn't create an environment. You can create incredible scenes. Like the things that you can now do in Unity are really impressive. Yeah. Okay. I'll say let's stop there.
Okay. So Octavian, thank you for the heroic, very, very full-on workshop. It was very nice indeed, and it was very nice to play with Unity again. I will be using Unity quite a bit on the work I'm developing at the moment. I'm developing this digital twin, and we are planning to use Unity for visualizing stuff, bring data and visualize this together with the geometry.
Wow.
So it's really nice to see it and see the latest version, and also how to optimize the pipeline so you have a very performant system. Just wonder if okay, I think the guy from Hong Kong left. Oh my God, he must be exhausted. Must be like early morning or no, very late in the night.
Very late, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and Nicole is still there. So I just wonder if there are any other. So Nicole asked, what other packages need to be installed to bring the model to your mobile or augmented reality? Yes, there's 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, so to bring it to your mobile, Unity already comes with XR plugin. Well, it's not a plugin, it's built in. You just have to turn it on and then deploy to the device. For HoloLens, it's now really straightforward. There's almost like maybe it will take you half an hour to do it. And that's it. I think the fact that it's so simple, that's what makes it for me powerful. It's not the same for Unreal. Unreal still is a bit more longer process, but you can do it. It's also because Unity has partnered with Microsoft, so that's why it's so straightforward from Unity.
Yeah, yeah, and this is actually one of the reasons why we choosing to use Unity is because of this close collaboration with Microsoft.
I find them also much easier to talk to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They're much more likely to respond, to engage, and also involved in education.
Yeah, that's very cool.
For me, I asked for an education grant, was given one, and the stuff we do in our studio with machine learning, I wouldn't do it anywhere else because it's quite well integrated with TensorFlow and other things like this. So yeah, I don't know. I find it as it's not the best graphics, but to be honest, I'm not after the best graphics.
Yeah, but I believe if you tweak it enough, you get pretty good looking.
No, you can get almost the same quality. It's just
Yeah.
yeah, doesn't have the same buzz. Yeah.
Yes, I was very pleased with the last, the last few examples they released, So very, very interesting, very convincing. Yeah. There's always one system playing catch up with the other system constantly.
That being said, the people from Unreal are also amazing. I remember they came to our office and we helped them deploy it. And
yeah.
They also have these amazing tools that automate what I showed you, the geometry optimization, preparation for the engine, the data smith thing, which I think it is quite good. The fact that you can get Revit to not necessarily Unreal, but Twinmotion, which is still Unreal, or even to Unreal using data smith. I think that's a really, really powerful thing. It's just learning curve, a bit harder, not so straightforward for HoloLens, but you still can do it. Yeah. I'm not sure they're involved in education. That's the only.
Yeah, that's cool. Mikhail, you have any final questions or any comments?
Yeah, I guess just relate to what you said earlier, that I guess now that all these engines are being targeted more towards the AEC industry, as you said, they're making it easier, like with the datasmith on Unreal, and they're doing the same with Unity. Also, I know we had a lot of conversations early on about data and digital twins. So here, this was just like an example for geometry, but if we had like such as metadata within the Rhino, can these be brought in as well and then revealed in the AR?
Well, I would say yes, but you have to define what metadata is attached to geometry. I find, for example, Rhino is not a metadata clever part. It has very little if you think about it, but definitely things from the beam wall, right? That is more rich. And I actually thinking about it because you asked this. It's interesting when you look at large scale projects, especially the ones that require collaboration between engineers, architects, other stakeholders. The fact that we have now, okay, not so much using game engines, but that we use platforms where we exchange it. I guess the one that's the most used is this work, which is literally able to load really, really large sets of structure, MEP, and all with metadata or manufacturer information, suppliers, who's the asset owner, and so on. It's just that it's not the prettiest to look at. It does the job.
And very heavy. You mentioned a lot about optimization, but it's not like just the geometry and all of this extra data. It's for whatever platform you have to deliver on, you have to optimize in other software.
Yes, if you try to do it through game engines, it will require quite a lot of optimization, but that's what I'm saying. So for example, Navis work has already this process automated of optimizing, and the fact that you're able to load really large data sets, it's impressive. And also credit to Autodesk. Just looking at their BIM 360, again, that is browser based, and it's quite good as well. Loading all of these querying information. I think the software providers are not the issue. I think the issue is more the industry, if you ask me. Maybe architecture is quite close to the latest, but not everyone has catched up. So, for example, structural engineering, I find they're also close. But if you look at MEP engineering, not so, or depends. And definitely construction, if you go to tradespeople, or then you really find it even harder, right? Like to find that they're up to date with technology to really use it. But more and more we see it, like the fact that you have people now costing things more accurately, and
So like you said before, it would take you a few months to do. Now you can do in a few hours. So it's making it more accessible to the architects.
I find that for now the mixed reality is probably most useful to communicate design, not to deliver projects yet, but it could become that. And I think it will become that, because I can imagine a lot of things that are now communicated with drawings and specifications and so on, being given as twins, digital twins, and much more useful because with relationship between parts. Then a set of drawings relate to each other, but it's almost like an encoding of information that you have to be trained to decode the encoding, right? It's not very easy, right? I guess if you look at the set of drawings as an architect, you know it because you've done them. But if you give them to, I don't know, someone who might not be, they will look at the encoding and many times find the information hard to understand, which is different. Like you give someone a physical model which they can take apart and look at it, it's instantly more intuitive in a way. Like, okay, and I found this also as well. If you try to explain to someone, that's why we use now more and more these like BIM 360, Navis work. You have the model, you go into it, take it apart, section it, look at it, talk to it, especially with contractors that build things. It's easier than, oh, let me give you a set of sections and plans and exploded axes.
Yeah. This holistic approach, so you can pick whatever you want. You don't have to be pulling out these drawings, as you said.
You skip the engaging part. You have a representation that is a twin of the actual thing you want to make. Yeah. It's better than having to encode the information into an abstraction, which is a drawing, right? It's an abstraction of a thing that, yeah. But I think it will take a while to be something that, yeah. But it's happening. Like we have some advanced manufacturers that go and say, no, don't bother with drawings. Give us your models, and if they're with metadata on them, even better. How things are connected and so on. No.
And more and more, the industry is expecting this. They don't want the drawing. They expect you to be level 2 BIM to have these models. So as time goes on, you'll have to adapt to this.
I wouldn't say it's like that, but you'll probably get there. Yeah.
Sooner or later, yes. Some are slower than others.